Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I am so excited to introduce today a change expert. Listen, we talk all about start again moments, but I have brought in the perfect guest for us to talk about this particular topic. So Brian Gorman is a change expert, and he has gone from an introverted Eagle Scout as a college freshman to one of the co-owners of the 4-day workweek trademark. Brian is a public speaker, an author, a podcast host, and now my podcast guest. Brian, thank you for joining me.
I'm excited to be here, Shauna.
I am so thrilled to see where our conversation goes. We talked a little bit before I hit record, and this whole idea of change, I read either on your website or your profile that you talked about embracing change, whether or not we've chosen it. And I talk a lot about that on this show. So I'm excited to see where the conversation goes. But first, why don't you give my audience a little intro to who you are, and specifically, how have you embraced this idea of starting again?
The first time really was when what you cited earlier. I arrived at Syracuse in 1967. I was an introvert. I was an Eagle Scout. And I decided I needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I joined a fraternity. But being an Eagle Scout, I joined Alpha Phi Omega, which is the National Service Fraternity. So there was certainly the social aspect, but there was also the aspect of service built into our commitments, if you will.
Okay.
And I ended up that year doing youth work on the Onondaga Reservation outside of Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
At the time, the university's mascot was the Saltine Warrior, a Native American representation represented by Caucasian fraternity brothers dressed up as Hollywood Indians and running around like drunken Indians.
Yes.
And so I spent the rest of my undergraduate days actually trying to get the university to change its mascot. I failed. It took the Onondaga Nation 10 years to make that happen. But in my DNA, this thing about making change happen was activated. Mm-hmm. And it's been at the core of the work that I've been doing ever since. It's also been at the core of how I've lived my personal life ever since.
Yes. Yes. And you told me one of these, before we started recording, you told me you've had lots of these start again moments. And I told you that a lot of, our motto on this show is it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So you've had lots of these moments where you've done some things later in life, and these start again moments, you're no stranger to. So tell us a little bit more.
I will highlight just some of them. So I am now 74. When I turned 65, 9 years ago, I decided that it was time for me to be much more intentional about paying it forward. At 66, I became a coach. At 68, I published a chapter in Springer's Handbook of Personal and Organizational Transformation. Around the same time, over a period of 2 years, I published, and these are my first-time publications.
Yes.
I published 24 articles with Forbes Coaches Council, and at 72 or 73, I became vice president for program development at a professional development firm called Quantivos. So professionally, I've been starting over a lot.
Yes.
In the last decade. And then personally, when I was 61, I took in a young man that I had been serving informally as a big brother to for 2 years when he became homeless. And 3 years later, I adopted him and became a first-time parent.
I love this.
So starting over
Yes.
is part of my life. And the thing that this conversation is making me think about is the idea that with all this happening in this world that's driving change, from everything that COVID forced on the workplace to artificial intelligence to who knows what's next,
Right.
we all need to be really good at unlearning and relearning, at starting over.
Oh my gosh, I could not have said it better. And I don't know that I have quite connected those dots before. The start again moments to the unlearning and relearning, which is so integral in being able to kind of embrace change in a new opportunity. So a lot of my focus has been post-divorce. I wrote a book about building your life after divorce. And a lot of that is embracing this change that oftentimes was not at your request, and being able to kind of not only make the best of it, but very intentionally choose how you're going to move forward. And a lot of that is unlearning a lot of things that we have held as core beliefs. And so I love that you just made that connection. I've talked around all of those things, but never quite directly that way. So that's great.
When I was a kid, my grandparents taught me how to play pinochle.
Mm.
And I used to be a grump
Yeah.
when I got dealt a bad hand.
Yes.
And I don't know whether he meant it as a life lesson, but it has been a life lesson. My grandfather would say, you can't choose the hand you're dealt. It's always up to you how you play it.
Yes.
And so with my clients, it's always, you have a choice. We sometimes are socialized into thinking we're victims. We always have choice.
Yes.
But choice doesn't have to mean, do I have ice cream or cherry apple, cherry pie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes choice is between two pretty sticky things.
Yes. 100%.
And there is still choice. And there is still choice. And sort of my fundamental question when I work with clients is, what makes your heart sing?
Uh-huh.
And sometimes the question is, given this happened, what can make your heart sing in this circumstance?
Yes. Such a good question. And I think in my line of work, what I find is many people have forgotten the answer to that question. And so a lot of this new opportunity is there's a self-discovery component, and there's a remembering who you are, but also a discovering who you want to be. And so I think being able to answer that question, what makes your heart sing? What do you want? What do you like? What do you desire? Is kind of the core first. I say often, baby steps are better than no steps. And that's one of the tiny, tiny baby steps, is to figure out, which ends up being a really big one, but it feels tiny just to decide what you want. But that's really good. Yeah. What makes your heart sing? That's a prettier way to say it for sure. So what do you think surprised you most about your journey from where you started as that college freshman to where you are now?
Just about all of it.
Yes.
And in a number of different ways. In fourth grade, I discovered graph paper.
Mm.
And in fourth grade, I decided I wanted to be an architect.
Okay.
All the way through high school, when we had career days, I always was matched up with a different local architect and entering architectural competitions for high school students. And I think I was the only student in my high school that took mechanical drawing every year, and was allowed to do so because I kept on advancing. And then I got into college and I discovered I liked people.
Yeah.
Not drawing ports. And I didn't really have the creativity to be, I could be technically the architect I wanted to be, but I couldn't creatively be the architect I wanted to be. And so to me, that said, I'm not creative.
Mm.
And it took a lot of years and a partner who tried for 5 years to teach me how to draw before, after we broke up and we were still good friends, told me, maybe you should buy a camera.
Oh.
And I discovered I am creative. I actually have a photograph in the permanent collection of the Museum of Fine Art in Houston. But I also discovered that creativity comes in all sorts of different ways.
Yes.
So it comes in my thinking, it comes in how my writing, it comes in how I work with my clients, it comes in um, how I raise my son and work with my son who has a number of disabilities. Um, so
I
all of this is surprising
yeah.
to me
Yes. Well,
along the way, and and I guess what's important is, again, whenever one of these surprises comes up, this is what is. I can't change this.
mm-hmm.
So again, how do I learn to work with this to move forward in the best way possible?
I really love that story so much. Thank you for sharing, because one of my so I find people fascinating, like endlessly fascinating. They confuse the shit out of me. They're amazing at the same time. Like, I just find people fascinating. But part of part of that is that we all walk around believing these things that just simply aren't true. And my favorite type of person to talk to is the one who says, I'm not creative. Because, well, first of all, that's just a bold-faced lie. We're all creative. We're creative beings. We're meant to create. But you hit it on the head perfectly, because it's always different. Like, the way we create is different. I think, we're conditioned to think creativity is painting and drawing and something that you would do in elementary art class. But the but the truth of it is, there's all sorts of ways, which you just highlighted, that we can and get to be creative. And I find that the happiest people are the ones that are prioritizing being creative. So I love that you shared that story. So I guess when you look back, because this is one of my favorite questions to ask, is you think back to the younger version of you at whichever stage along the journey, what advice would you give him?
Believe in yourself.
Mm,
Don't believe in the stories that have become your truths.
that's good.
We are all incredible storytellers.
Yeah. Yes. Not always
And
good.
when you ask most people, they'll say, "No, I'm a lousy storyteller." But
Yeah. Yeah.
we're all incredible storytellers.
Yes.
And whether it's those stories we heard from our parents or our teachers or our classmates or guidance counselors or whatever, um, we keep repeating those stories. They become our truths. They guide how we live our lives, and they're all stories.
Yeah. They're all stories.
And if you can change your stories, you can change your life. You can turn that gremlin into a guru. You can
Yes.
leave that meaningless work and find fulfillment in something that makes your heart sing.
Hmm. I
So
love that.
believe in yourself and don't believe your
Your
stories.
stories. Yes. Yeah. We are all really great storytellers. One of my first online courses I created was called Change the Story, because whatever story you're telling yourself is likely the reason you're not getting where you want to be. So
Yeah.
change the story. Digging into that gets a little more complicated, but yes, it does simplify it to say that. I love that question because everyone answers it so differently, but there is a theme in all of the answers, which is encouragement and understanding and patience, and just like, you can do it. But the
Yeah.
believe in yourself is that's a big one. There's so many people walking around, like, especially when we talk about writing a book, and how many people I have heard say, "Oh my gosh, that's so incredible. You wrote a book. I want to write a book." And then they don't because of the imposter syndrome, because they're believing some story about themselves that simply is not true. And so being able to change the story and embrace change and go after the things that you want to is how you change your life. I love it. Well, and speaking of changing your life and looking forward, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
I believe it's possible for me to continue doing what I'm doing for a lot of years ahead. When people ask me about retirement, it's not part of my vocabulary because I'm doing what I love to do.
Mm-hmm.
As a podcast host, I very often have authors,
Mm-hmm.
and my podcast is focused on business leadership at all levels, from the front line to the C-suite. And so I'm constantly reading, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly exploring new areas and thinking new thoughts. At Quantivos, I oversee the development of our group coaching programs. And again, that allows me to bring in new ways of thinking for organizational leaders. And I just see ongoing learning and growth for a whole lot of years ahead, because you mentioned earlier that I'm a co-owner of the 4-Day Work Week trademark. Um, Tony Carnese and I purchased that trademark. Um, it actually came through the week after COVID
Mm,
hit and shut down the world. And so nobody was really interested in a 4-day work week, but our incentive was the recognition that there could be significant change in how people lived their work life, so that there could be significant change in how they live their lives.
right.
And COVID was the first catalyst for really making that real. Artificial intelligence was the next, and I personally believe that we are at the equivalent of the early stages of the Industrial Revolution, except the change is happening a whole lot faster now than it did then.
Right.
And just like then, we have no idea where work, life, and the blend of those two are going to end up 5 or 10 years from now. So I see continuing, starting over again in my life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, as the change expert, I would expect no less than you embracing things to continue changing. Well, so tell us, you told us a little bit about your podcast, but tell everyone what it's called, first of all, so they can go over and listen.
It's Conversations, powered by Quantivos. Quantivos is a professional development firm with coaching as our core modality, but we're not a coaching company. We do integrate the coaching into a number of different kinds of professional development activity. Um, Quantivos is Latin for choose to be your best.
Mm.
And Conversations is based on really a quote from Judith Glasser, who spent her lifetime researching the neuroscience of conversation. And what she really talks about is everything happens through conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a conversation every week with a thought leader or thought leaders around some aspect of how you live your life, how you live your life as a leader, how you lead, the things that might impact your life. So, um, did one with an individual who, after becoming a millionaire, ended up living in a crack house, penniless, um, and then turned his life around again. Talk about starting over.
Yeah.
Another with an executive who left his job to be with his wife as she went through early stage dementia.
Mm.
How do you select a leadership team for your organization? I'm reading one now called a book now that I'll be recording later this month, called The Character Compass, on how do you develop character in your leadership. So I have fun.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've been kind of doing my own soul searching a little bit about this whole idea of what makes your heart sing. And this is why people struggle. The same reason I did a little bit is because my answer feels wrong, right? Like somehow we think we're going to get it wrong. But really what lights me up is learning and continuing to learn and evolving and continuing to grow into this best version of me that I could possibly be. And that feels like homework to some people. And it feels like, why do you want to work so hard? But for me, the idea of reading another book and getting to talk to the author and discovering a new way that I can embrace, like improving my character, to me is like, oh my gosh, I could talk about that for hours. And so I'm like, oh wait, that's my answer. That's my answer. That's what
Great.
lights me up. Well, I think this conversation has been so super fun. And let me ask you this. Is there anything else about change that you would like to add to the conversation that we haven't already discussed that would be a good leave behind for the audience?
Absolutely. And I'm paraphrasing Joseph Campbell now. For those who don't know who Joseph Campbell was, he was a mythologist and a psychologist in the mid-20th century. And one of the things he researched was, is there a common pattern of, let's say, creation myths across culture, across time? Is there a common pattern of coming of age myths across culture, across time? And what he discovered is there's one pattern to all myth.
Mm.
And he called the pattern the hero's journey. And myths are about the journeys through change. And what he demonstrated to us, and I'm paraphrasing him here, is that while we approach each change as if it's unique and unpredictable, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking the same journey over and over and over again. So the hero's journey has become sort of the foundation for all of my coaching, because the catalyst may be different.
Yep.
The obstacles may be different. The path through is the same.
Yes, that is so good. I'm just sitting with that for a second. That is amazing. Well, let me ask you one last question, and that is, how can people find you?
My website is TransformingLives.Coach, and I am Brian at TransformingLives.Coach.
Fabulous. Well, I will be sure to provide all the links in the show notes for folks to find. I guess one last question is, your favorite client, the favorite group of people you like to work with, who is that? And, so people listening can identify themselves in that answer.
Anyone who recognizes that they have a significant change to make and are willing to step into that, even if they don't know what that means or where it's going to take them.
I love that. And that's everybody listening. Oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for this opportunity, Shona.
Well, hey, thanks for listening today. And thank you for your reviews. They mean so much to me and they help this podcast grow. I just love reading them. So if you haven't left one yet, please do. Now, listener, are you having your own start again moment? Your path to thriving after divorce is here. The future may be uncertain, but there is hope. We know that losing your identity as a wife can be disheartening, and the grief that follows is humbling. In fact, it can feel crippling. But if you are ready to get back on your feet, download my Start Again guide to get you pointed in the right direction. You can find it at ShaunaLee.com/startagain.